you?
Gentlemen? Others? We will take up the following items for approval. Action items. Action item 1A is the approval of the minutes of the January 22nd, 2024 meeting. I move the approval of action item 1A. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The matter is approved. We will now address action item B, the policy calendar. Policy item 1B1 is a resolution to authorize an enterprise firewall service and maintenance license agreement with the Palo Alto Networks Corporation. The university's current Palo Alto Enterprise License and Maintenance Agreement will expire on June 30, 2024, and given the importance of maintaining a robust cybersecurity infrastructure to reduce cybersecurity risk, the university is requesting the Board of Trustees to authorize renewal of the 5-year maintenance and license agreement and the replacement of 70 end-life firewalls, as well as Palo Alto 24x7x3, 24 by 7 by 365. Good if you can read. Active cybersecurity monitoring services for 3 years. The anticipated 5-year cost for the equipment and services being procured from Palo Alto Networks Corporation will not exceed $23 million. Vice Chancellor for Information Technology and University Chief Information Officer Seb Formoso is available to provide further deep background on the item or to answer any questions as needed. So I will move the approval of policy item 1B1. Is there a second?
Aye.
Okay. Discussion. Seb, I have one question. You explained it to me, but just clear. The main contract is 5 years. The secondary contract is 3 years.
Yes.
What happens for the remaining 2 years?
If our objective is to become self-sufficient within those 3 years, so we don't need to keep procuring the services from Palo Alto to monitor the environment. If we are not able to be proficient, we would be able to leverage the 47% discount that OGS, that we were able to negotiate from OGS to be able to leverage those years. But our objective is to be able to develop our own skills in-house so that we don't necessarily have to be having the vendor here for 5 years.
Thank you. Any other questions, discussion? Hearing none, let's proceed to a vote. All in favor, please indicate.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? This matter is adopted. Policy item 1B2 is a resolution to authorize contract with American Chemical Society for the ACS publication package. The University Dean of Libraries and Information Resources, Kristen Hart, is available to provide further background on this item or to answer questions. I move the approval of item 1B2. Do I have a second?
Second.
We do have to keep those chemists in their books, right? Yeah. Any discussion? Hearing none, let's proceed to a vote. All in favor, please indicate. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The matter is adopted. Policy item 1B3 is a resolution to authorize a contract with OCLC to provide subscription to OLS interlibrary loan services. The current contract with OCLC expires on May 31st, 2024. And the university would like to renew this contract for a period of 5 years for an amount not to exceed $2,952,248. The University Dean of Libraries and Information Resources, Kristen Hart, is available. I move the approval of this policy item. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or any questions? This is straightforward. All right. Proceed to a vote. All those in favor, please indicate.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Policy item 1B3 is approved. Policy item 1B4 is a resolution to authorize a contract with Gilbert International, Inc. for building operations, engineering, maintenance, and janitorial services at the Graduate School and University Center. The Graduate School owns and occupies approximately 600,000 square feet of space at 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, and is responsible for management administration, and operating costs of the facility. The graduate school does not employ staff to perform building services and has historically utilized contractual services for building operations, engineering, maintenance, and janitorial services. The graduate school issued a competitive invitation for bids, received 4 responsive proposals, and determined that Gilbert International, Inc., a New York State certified MWBE vendor, was the lower bidder. The graduate school is seeking authorization to enter into a contract not to exceed $40,871,724 over a period of 5 years. The graduate school senior vice president for finance and administration, Brian Peterson, is available to provide further background on this item or to answer any questions. I move the approval of policy item 1B4. Do I have a second? Is there any discussion or any
Mr.
questions?
Chairman. I just wanted to make one point for the committee. This is the largest MWA contract probably in the history of CUNY.
Wow.
So, very proud of the work, very proud of to be able to offer a prime contract to MWE. So just wanted to make sure that we go on the record on that.
Thank you. We'll just move up the line.
Okay.
Lorraine?
So my question was not so much about this contract, but this notion. Is this something that we're looking across CUNY, to look at janitorial services and looking at having a uniform approach to do that? Or do we think that gives us scale? So that's,
No, this is this is an unusual situation. Probably there's only 2 other schools that have this kind of arrangement. For the most part, this arrangement, we have our own staff that does this kind of work. But it's not something that we're looking to scale. But because of the graduate center, the way it's set up, it's just economically unfeasible for the graduate center to be able to staff up, to be able to provide these services.
okay, great, thank you. So,
Vice Chair Wilkin?
Thank you, Chair Berger. In particular, it is good to see, and I appreciate the Executive Vice Chancellor Batista's point about the goals and for minority and women businesses. For this particular contract, would the policy continue for any contracts or sub-consultancy requirements that there would be goals for other minority and women businesses or SDVOs?
Yeah, for this particular contract, to answer your question, obviously, yes. But I think in this particular contract, I don't think it's necessary. I think this company will cover all the necessary usage that they need, and it is a fully MWE company. Also, to be noted that it is also a union contract. So we're obviously continue to CUNY is a union organization, so we're going to obviously continue to do that work. But to answer your question is yes.
We still have a forum.
that's good to know.
Thank you. Professor Ben?
Well, not for tonight, but at some point, it would be interesting to know what our estimate would be to do this in-house. I mean, I've heard it said that it can't be done in-house because of special conditions, but I don't think that that's exactly the case. While there seem to be many benefits to doing this, could we sometime learn what the estimate of doing it ourselves would be?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that in this particular case, because when the Graduate Center was created, this is the way the Graduate Center from a staffing perspective was set up. This particular kind of contract sort of lends itself. I think in other situations, other colleges, the way the college has been set up, we do have all those kind of staff built into it. But yes, happy to come back to the committee and really present.
Or just an information circulation. Sure. I mean,
Absolutely.
It would just be interesting to have that information
Absolutely.
And it'd be just as interesting to have it in the converse.
Yes.
It would be profound.
Thank you. Any further questions, discussions? Seeing none, let's proceed to a vote.
Overhead.
All those in favor on
You can have
policy item 1B4, please so indicate.
Annual equipment,
Any opposition?
supplies.
Any abstentions? This item is approved.
System this big?
Policy item 1B5 is a resolution to approve the Personnel Matters Report of the Finance and Administration Committee. The April 2024 Personnel Matters Report is generated from employee data entered into the university system of record between December 15, 2023 and February 9, 2024, and does not contain appointments that have been submitted as individual resolutions. The report contains 29 ECP actions, including 11 regular appointments, 8 interim appointments or interim extensions, 1 title change, and 9 separations. Executive Vice Chancellor and Chief Operating Officer Batista is available to provide further background on this item, to answer any questions as needed. I move the approval of policy item 1B5. Is there a second? Thank you. Questions and answers. I have just, this raises one issue for me, and it's, we're out here hiring, 19 or 20 people. And the question is, as we go through this and we're facing the financial situation we're in, how does this mesh with our desire to reduce our headcount, particularly in the administrative level? And how are we handling that, not only in terms of this, but particularly in what the colleges are doing as they get vacancies in administrative positions?
Sure, I'll start, and then if Sharif wants to jump in if I miss anything. Obviously, we have 9 colleges of financial high concerns. Those colleges obviously are in a sort of 2-for-1. For every 2 vacant positions, you're allowed to hire 1. So this follows right along that process. And we no longer have a vacancy review board. Each college, when they submit the financial plan, has to submit a sort of a hiring plan, and the finance department sort of monitors to make sure that hiring continues to follow sort of those guidelines. The one thing that I would say, Mr. Chairman, is that a lot of these appointments, as you alluded to, are interim appointments. So in a lot of cases, these positions are not positions that are permanent appointments to the university. Furthermore, a lot of the positions that are being appointed are, in a lot of ways, mission-critical positions that are needed to continue the business of the university. And obviously, based on all those things, we, sort of support the movement of these positions forward, but constantly monitoring as our financial situation continues to be fluid as we go into this cycle of trying to get more resources for the university.
Vice Chancellor Solomon, do you have something to add?
Just briefly, I think that as CAO Batista mentioned, we are no longer in the vacancy review board mode when we have our next phase of this, which is, of course, for colleges of high financial concern, the 2-for-1. And so I think that we've been working really closely with not only the 9 colleges of high financial concern, but also the other colleges to make sure that, hiring decisions are prudent, hiring decisions are absolutely necessary for the university, and we continue to work with them on obviously reducing the structural deficit, which we'll get into in our presentation shortly.
Thank you.
It begs the question, sir, can I have one more? It begs the question of, and I can't remember the title of this review committee that you had. Why was that dismantled, or, it really begs the question to give for a little more information on that, even though
You can start.
I might have fallen on my head when you did that, but.
No, absolutely. It's a great question, trustee. I mean, I think if you look back at the past couple of fiscal years, to be able to address the structural deficit, there were actions taken, across the board actions, 2% savings target, in fiscal '23 and fiscal '24 across the board, 5.5% to 7%. As we move into the next phase of trying to address the structural deficit, we're taking a more targeted approach. We're really looking deep into the financials, working with those colleges, coming up with objective criteria that we can use to see what kind of interventions are needed, and moving there. That list is not a static list, it's a dynamic list. And so colleges could come off the list, colleges could be put on the list. And I think that that is the message and really the collaboration with all the colleges to understand that next phase about not only the hiring restrictions, but the deficit reduction targets that would be put in place.
I just want to remind the board that, just in the community college, we're down 400 positions, just at the community college. So, and obviously, it's something that the chancellor and the senior team really looks at very closely, and we make sure that, well, obviously, they're both aligned with the financial conditions of that particular college overall, but that's just an example of kind of where we are.
There's quite a few interim appointments, and I may not know the background, but is there a reason why a few colleges would appoint interim and not like full-time search?
Yeah. In order for, sometimes the timing of when the search kicks off, you have, you have a candidate that you're sort of looking to be in that mix. A lot of cases, you have a vacancy, so you name somebody to hold that position as you do the search. There are a lot of different conditions. And in some other cases, the presidents decide themselves that they want to appoint somebody as an interim because they're trying to figure out what kind of position they really need, what kind of person they really need, that they want to sort of create two positions, create one position out of two. There's a host of different reasons why somebody's in an interim position.
Yeah. I know that a couple of these are at Hunter College, where there's a new president just
That's right.
coming in.
Right.
And we
Great
want
point.
to make sure the new president has time to make
That's
a
right.
fully informed decision. That happens kind of frequently. Further
Respect and
questions?
courtesy.
Great point.
Seeing none, let's proceed to a vote. All those in favor of policy item 1B5, please indicate.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, that item is adopted. I move, okay, where are we? Okay, policy items 1B6 through 1B15. We're combining these are all the individual appointments. These are regular and interim members of the Executive Compensation Plan. Policy item B6 is Corey Cush, Vice President for Information Technology at Borough of Manhattan Community College. B7 is Pete Gutierrez as Interim Dean of Health Science and Nursing. I'll notice the resolution in the body refers to the position as Dean of Nursing, but it's Dean of Health Science and Nursing. The resolution itself simply refers to the position of Dean, so there's no problem there. B8 is Ismael Perez as Vice President of Finance and Administration at City College. Items 9 through 11 are at Hunter College. It's either Minoy or Minoj Pardesani, Interim Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost. Jennifer Tootin as Interim Dean of the School of Education. And Peter Englo, or Englot? Englo, thank you, as Interim Senior Vice President for Communications and External Affairs and Executive Deputy to the President. John Jay College, Myrna Fournet as Interim Executive Legal Counsel. Lehman College, Kelly Mansfield Brown, Vice President of Institutional Advancement. Macaulay Honors College, Stephanie Hyacinth, Interim Vice President of External Relations. And at York College, Eduardo Rios, Vice President of Finance Administration. Presidents and staff from the various colleges are present and available to provide further background on these items or to answer any questions as needed. I move the approval of policy items B6 through B15. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion or any questions on any of these wonderful appointments? Seeing none, let's proceed to a vote. All those in favor, please indicate.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? These items are approved. With no more items on the policy calendar, I will address section 3 for information items. There is one information item on the agenda. Information item 2A is the fiscal year 2024 mid-year financial report. Senior Vice Chancellor and Chief Financial Officer Sharif Suleiman will report on this item. Before he does, let me just mention, earlier today, our Vice Chancellors Hensel, Batista, and Suleiman appeared before the City Council at their higher education budget meeting. They were terrific. After they left, Trustee Dumbaya also testified. She was amazingly supportive, and that's very nice to know. So, but it was quite a performance this morning. You all would have been proud.
Yay.
And the council members who were there were overwhelmingly supportive of our position. Some going even a little further beyond than where we were. But it was an encouraging hearing. But there's still one more to go. So let's see what
Well,
happens
that's always
next.
the easiest one.
Vice Chancellor.
Thank you, Chair Berger. Thank you for joining us today and for the support. And I hope we can have a repeat performance here now. So to go over the numbers in the mid-year, as you see here in this graph, since fiscal 2021, you see that the structural deficit has gone up and has increased to the peak of $234 million in fiscal '22. A number of actions were taken, across-the-board actions, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, hiring freezes, savings targets, et cetera. And as you can see, those all had a significant effect on bringing down the structural deficit to the first quarter projection, which was $128 million, and without factoring in any new labor contracts, I just want to point out. And now at the mid-year projection, dropping by $21 million to $107 million is the projected structural deficit. And so it's good news that it's going down. And it's going down because of a number of different reasons. I think you see the downward deficit trend not only is because some of the actions that are being taken at the colleges of high financial concern are beginning to take hold. Also, your approval of the $37 million of unallocated state dollars, which have flown to the colleges and are essentially baked into the numbers, that is also helping. That was for senior colleges. And so those are the main contributors, but the trend is tempered somewhat by the recognition of the recently ratified and approved DC 37 and classified staff contract, because as it stands now, I just want to emphasize, as it stands now, the contract has been ratified, but a portion of it for the senior colleges remains unfunded. Now, we are really encouraged by the state budget and what we're seeing, not only in the governor's budget, but in the One House budgets, which we'll go over in a second. And so there is reason to be encouraged and to be optimistic. But it is recognized in this financial report as an obligation because it is a ratified and approved contract. What you also see that's positive, that's helping drive this number to what it is, tuition revenue. We have an uptick in enrollment, which of course is helpful to the bottom line, certainly. And we know that the first quarter was $68 million was the projected tuition revenue, and now we're at $77 million, which is basically attributable to a combination of what we're seeing for the fall 2023 and the spring 2024 projections. So that is positive. Year-over-year expenses are projected to increase from $91 million in what it was in Q1 to $139 million. Now, really, what's driving that is some of the spend down of the one-time transformative funds, the projection of that, some infrastructure investments. That's what's really driving some of the OTPS and PS expenditures. So as I mentioned, the uptick enrollment helping the revenue projections, and what you see here is the FTE enrollment here, which is up roughly 2%, and the tuition and fee so that is fall to fall, right? But the revenue projections also incorporate spring and what we're seeing there, right? So again, that just shows you how we're getting to the 77 million based on the full-time equivalents. Certainly, again, positive news, but there are risks, and we have to make sure that we are, on top of them as much as we can to mitigate them. I think, as you see in the mid-year report, there's a chart with the structural deficit and the number of colleges that have a structural deficit. It's 21. I think a major driver of that is certainly the enrollment declines that we've seen from pre-pandemic to now, the unfunded mandatory costs that the university has had to absorb. But you see, if you compare the Q1 to the midpoint, you see the numbers going in a certain direction because of the DC 37 contract, right? So again, we're encouraged by what we're seeing at the state level, and hopefully then those numbers by the third quarter report will look more favorable. We have 6 colleges that are projected to end the year with a cash deficit. And again, we're working, very closely with them to make sure that they end in balance. Higher tuition revenue, again, they're all projections. We need to see the actuals, make sure they materialize, so that's always a risk. Collective bargaining, again, the process hasn't concluded yet. We still have a ways to go for the enacted budget, and then the adopted budget, also at the city level, that we'd like to make sure that current policy continues on funding labor contracts. Salary step increases as well that are part of the negotiated contracts. Those go up. Mandatory costs the university has to absorb in most cases when they're not funded. Continued PEGs. I mean, as the chair mentioned, we were at the city council today and really making the case for restorations and making the case really for the impact of the PEGs, right? And what it meant on what it means on programs, what it means on campus operations. And I think, we laid out a comprehensive detailed explanation about what has been the impact recognized at the campus level. And so we're hopeful that we can have some restorations, but clearly that will continue to erode the fiscal stability if we aren't successful. And then lastly, again, the colleges of high financial concern, working with them to meet deficit reduction targets. We're hopeful that we will get to a place where they can be on sound fiscal footing and then be removed from the college of high financial concern list. So again, it mentioned a lot about the encouragement about what's happening. We've seen certainly the executive budget has come out, and it was, we thank the governor for putting forward support for CUNY, and we thank certainly the legislature, both houses, for putting real support for CUNY. And here you see some of the highlights. It's not everything, but the governor put in an additional $36 million in general operating support for the senior colleges. Again, we're really appreciative of the additional support. The Senate, the Assembly included $75 million more that would go to general operating support for senior colleges as well. The Senate proposal at $67 million for general operating support would be for senior colleges and for community colleges. And I would note that lined out in the Assembly's $75 million appropriation is $4 million for the medical school. Over in the Senate, which you'll see in one of the later lines on the rows on this table, the Senate added $6 million for the CUNY Medical School. The governor, in her 30-day amendments, advanced or put forward what is $38 million of an advance payment, which basically allows us to have $38 million for use in our current fiscal year, in fiscal year 24, to fund the one-time retro and one-time bonus associated with the DC 37 and classified staff contract. So we're really appreciative for that. Both houses carried that forward, included that in their one-house proposals. In the Assembly proposal, we also see a specific appropriation for $49 million. That goes towards funding the wage increases associated with the DC 37 classified staff contract for fiscal year 2024 and fiscal year 2025. So we are really grateful to see that lined out, and we're encouraged by the conversations that continue to happen as we try to close out the budget with a successful, fully funded contract. There's an asterisk there in the Senate. We would note that the Senate's resolution, while there is no appropriation, it does state that they would support additional funding for the contract if it's needed to fund collective bargaining. So CUNY's mentioned in all three, in some cases with an appropriation, some cases with a mention. We're really, again, I keep using the word encouraged because we are, to close out in the next few weeks about how we get to an enacted budget. Continuation of the community college funding floor, which is a really big deal for us. That continues. That would be worth $54 million to us if it were to be taken away, and we had to go back to the enrollment-based formula. So we are grateful that that continues. And lastly, transformative initiatives. This is the one-time funding, the 50 million, which has been reappropriated as we continue to work on spending that down. And just a few highlights on capital. Again, very positive here as well. In the executive, $441 million was included, a mix between capital infrastructure, expansion and improvement, certainly there, so we're appreciative. The Assembly adds to what was the last year's enacted budget of almost $1 billion, really driving up the expansion and improvement category, as you see there, at $635 million. And then the Senate also drove up to $1.1 billion, not only also with the expansion and improvement at $635 million, but also including a number of specific colleges or projects at colleges, which you see down below, and notably $150 million for Hostos for capital there. So, that's really just the highlights of what we've seen in the One Houses. Again, a few weeks to go. We will be working with the entire CUNY community. I know everyone's been advocating, and we've been getting a really positive response. But time to bring it home. Thank you.
Any questions or comments for our
Yeah.
vice chancellors or chancellor?
Yes.
Lorraine?
CEO Batista and Senior Vice Chancellor Solomon. The PEGs, you're asking for restoration, but was your PEG continued, or was your PEG removed?
It was continued. So now we have.
So you're one of the few that it was continued for.
Yeah, so we're happy that the third round of PEGs were canceled for the executive budget.
For everybody.
Correct, but we have baseline PEGs of $94 million for fiscal '24, and in fiscal '24 alone, it was $45 million. Of that 94 was included in fiscal '24 alone for the November plan and the January plan.
Right.
So we're happy that executive was canceled, but we're really working hard to restore as much as we can.
And I think the one challenge on the capital side is that we're very grateful. It's good to see that the Assembly and the Senate has given us that money. As you know, in the community college, we got to get a match from the city. Well, the problem that we're having is what we got into a discussion today at the hearing is really the city's pushing out our capital budget. So last year's allocation was pushed out to 2033. So it's hard to complete projects when we have projects that are being ready to be certified.
Yeah.
If the OMB is pushing those projects ahead. So the council was very, very focused on that, and we're gonna work with them to try to sort of deal with that. But as you know, we advocate for this. Like Hostos is an example of a school that is waiting for a building, and if I can't get the city to move that money forward, it does us a challenge to be able to get the money from the state and not be able to match it at the city side. So it's a real challenge.
Professor Benton?
Yeah, is the money for the capital project bonded, or is it somehow general revenues that are used for capital?
I'm not
You
sure
know,
I
well,
understand.
if the city was gonna provide more money for capital, are they getting it by issuing bonds?
That's not normally how they do it.
Yeah,
Right, they issue
okay,
bonds.
yeah,
So the problem is the city is trying to deal with their own debt services, so
Right.
we are we're the ones that are getting caught up in that whole
Yeah,
sort of situation.
got it. Sharif, John and I and Sharif had a conversation about it, the structural deficit trend table. And it was a very interesting kind of a lens into the structural deficit situation. At some point, we would like to see how the 37 million is allocated. We know some of that is allocated in those numbers, so it may have helped some of the numbers, but we know it's not all yet, because you don't know how much the stressed campuses are gonna need. We also noticed that the progress of the senior colleges was much greater than the progress of the community colleges in this table, which really is assessing like the size of the gap that you're chasing. And the gap got smaller for the senior colleges this time because they were catching up on their financial plans and all these things, but they didn't get better for the community colleges.
Yeah, I think there, Trustee Benton, what we're really looking at is that we have PEGs that's really driving those numbers. And I think that that's really the key, is to try to reverse those. Again, when the DC 37 contracts are finalized and the adopted budget is there, again, the community colleges, not concerned about. The policy remains on funding those numbers, but has to be in the adopted budget, which is not gonna happen for many months. And so that is where you start to see numbers, hopefully with some restorations as well, improve. And to your first point about sort of the senior colleges, and the 37 million, absolutely, we're going, in fact, the resolution that you approved requires us to come back and report to you. So we will absolutely do that, as the information becomes known on which colleges need that infusion at the end to balance.
As you,
One of the other side there, the community colleges, even though the last 2 semesters there's been an uptick in the enrollment, right? That gap from before, the losses that they suffer in terms of the revenue that's implicated by the enrollment loss is still significant. So that's also continues to play a role in that delta that you were saying, in addition to what Sharif mentioned.
well, as you also work with the state budget officials and stakeholders, do you find a tension between the state and the city, where the state doesn't want to give money to the city, to CUNY, and then have the city take it away and pocket it and use it? Is there a tension, a city-state tension that you're having to deal with?
Well,
City and state tension? Nope.
Less than before.
Okay, all right.
That's a very, that's a
Yeah,
very
I
clear
think,
statement.
I think it's just, suffice to say, it's been overwhelmingly positive. There are very strong supporters at the state level and the city level. The continuation of the funding floor is proof positive, right? You see that as something that's been carried by the executive and in each one house. So that, I think, is a clear signal that it's really about trying to help CUNY in any way possible.
Professor Rosani.
Part of the 37 million for the colleges that are on the, I'll call it the red list, required a savings at each campus of a certain amount. And I was looking to see if campuses were on track to meet that savings, but it gets muddled by the DC 37 additions and various subtractions. So the question basically is, are all of the senior colleges that have a target to cut in order to be eligible for this 37 million on track to do that?
Yeah, I think it's too early to tell. I think that we have continued, and we will, and we are continuing to meet monthly with each of the colleges and go through their financial plans, as opposed to the quarterly financial reports that we see. So we're continuing to pursue new strategies and figuring out where they stand. So it is too early to tell, but hopefully as we get to the third quarter, we'll start to see more of the actuals and then be able to, respond to say that all are on track or not.
Is there anything further? I think this was a good and helpful discussion, and I thank, there is. Salamanca.
You mentioned the 50 million transformative initiative funding, and you said continuing to use this funding. How has it helped so far?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. So we got the plan approved recently by the state budget director, and then we were able to get instructions out to the colleges for the 20 million direct allocations. And then those plans on how they're going to comply with the not only appropriation language that is very specific about transformative projects, but also with our strategic roadmap. And then that will start to flow. The state generously has given us another reappropriation, so we do have those funds to be used next year. But we'll be able to report on exactly how much was spent in this fiscal year, as is required twice each year, to be able to come back and let you know exactly how it's being spent.
Okay. How many students do we have in total in our community colleges? Let's say as of the end of the fall.
Well, a good estimate is 40% of 235, if we have to do a traditional, but I guess somebody might have the actual
I
numbers.
can send that information to you. Yeah, I've got it upstairs, but I don't have it here.
There might be an enrollment figure here.
We pause for a moment. Look at the papers.
Yeah, so in the report, we're showing a little over 73,000 for the fall.
Page 17 in the.
Yeah, she got there quicker than.
Yep.
17, page 17. Thank
So
you.
73,000.
Okay. My last question is, if I may,
Please.
how have these hiring freezes helped with the structural deficit so far? I know you touched a little bit on it, but I would like more expansion.
Sure, it's certainly helped on the savings. I believe in the 2% savings target, let me just give you the exact numbers. We were able to have savings of 67 million. And so they basically have contributed to the reduction of the structural deficit. I think that that's pretty much what we have in terms of 67 for the across-the-board savings targets. I think that what you will see as we move forward with the deficit reduction plans, again, some of the community colleges, for example, earlier in the testimony, we talked about how it was, over 400 positions since fiscal 2021 we're down. So savings that basically result from that as well.
And do we know if the hiring freezes have affected retention and enrollment in any way?
They have, we have, and you can't, when you don't have student advisors at the same level or frontline staff, it certainly affects the environment and the ability to retain. Depends on which school you're looking at. BMCC, for example, reported that they think a 4% drop in retention is due to the hiring freeze that they've had to implement. So overall, it's hard to disentangle why numbers go up or down, especially with the pandemic and the fact that we still have cohorts that were affected by learning loss coming through. But certainly when you start losing advisors or don't replace them, or you don't replace, as I said, counseling services, all of those wraparound things that make students successful, it can have a negative impact on graduation rates.
And we are counting on this new funding or the funding we're getting to get back these services for our students?
We're not counting on it, we're hoping for it.
Hoping for
And
it.
if we get it back, then
Well, and that's why that's why the strategy has been to insist on the making sure that if we get contracts signed, that we get the funding for that labor contract, because a decent chunk, I mean, there's the enrollment scenario, but a decent chunk of why we've had that situation is because of that structural situation in the past. So that is the first step in being able to replenish some of the staffings that we want on the campuses.
Thank you.
So just one clarification. The hiring freeze alone, 150 million in savings. The savings targets, the 2% and the 5%, that was the 67 million that I was referring to. There is some overlap in those numbers because the savings plans included personal services and OTPS, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. Is there anything further? Well, thank you all for your participation. And with no more items on the agenda, I move to adjourn this meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any opposition? Hearing none. The motion is adopted and we are adjourned.
This was a short meeting.